In Power Query, we looked at the fact that on the left-hand side, you can see all the queries or the tables that you have imported into Power Query. And I can see at this stage, we have a total of 14 queries. Now, it's good practice to name your queries helpful names that make it obvious what data is contained within the various queries. So what I'm going to ask you to do is rename some of these. For example, Sales 2021. Sales 2021, I'm going to go over to here to the properties and rename it Sales 2019 to 2021 because that's the actual range that that data reflects. And when I press enter, you can see that that name change is reflected over here in the queries. So there's a variety of ways that you can rename a query. You can change it here, you can change it in all properties, you can go up to this properties button here, you can right click here and just rename, or I actually just click on it and press F2. So I'm going to go to the orders query, for example, press F2, right arrow and add space 1997 to 2000 and enter. Really easy to rename them. Orders 2, I'm going to click it, press F2, right click, right arrow and take off the last 4 characters. So it's just orders. And the customers table, I actually want to delete this customers table. So anything query related, just right click. If you want to delete it, rename it, duplicate it, move it up, move it down, it's all possible using a right click. Moving up and moving down is also possible just by dragging. But I want to delete the customers table. So I'll go for this delete option. Are you sure you want to delete the customers and delete? If I did need it, I could turn around and import it again. Now the customers to table, I'm going to F2, right arrow and take off the last 4 characters, the 4th character being the space, and press enter, and I've renamed that one customers. So really easy to sort of tidy up your queries, and best practice to change any uncommon or unhelpful query names to names that are obvious that the user is familiar with. Okay, now I'd actually like to look at, and we've looked at some of the steps here as well, I'd like to bring in a new source of data. So I'm just going to grab the window, move it down a bit. So I'll go new source, file, Excel workbook. I want to bring in another Excel workbook. And the Excel workbook I want to bring in is the target and actual sales workbook, and import. And in the navigator, once the connection is made, I want to bring in the sheet, hence the little icon, sales by region. And you can see the data there, and OK. Now, once I bring this data in, I'm going to transform it a little bit. First of all, I want to manage the rows. First thing I want to do with the rows is I want to promote the first row as a header, as the column headings. So use first row as headers. Done. Next thing I want to do is remove some of the columns. So I'm going to choose column, go to column, and I want to go to the grand total column. And the grand total column I want to remove, so I'm going to remove columns. Notice you can just right click and do that as well. I want to rename the first column, choose columns, go to columns, and I want to go to row labels and OK, which is the first column. And I want to rename it, so I'll click its column heading, press F2, and I'll call it region and press enter. And so I basically brought in another Excel file and transformed and managed the rows and columns. If I click close and load, I'll see I'll have an extra sheet, which will be my target and actual sales, which is the sales by region query. And I want to save my data model, so I'll hit the save button or Control S. So we've brought in some more data. Now, best practice when it comes to naming tables, columns, and values. Really, there's no fixed rules, but it is recommended that you use language and abbreviations that are commonly understood or used within your organization, and that everybody agrees and considers them to be common terminology. It's best to give your tables and columns descriptive terms and replace any underscores with spaces, and be consistent with how you name things. But don't be excessively short in abbreviating things, but at the same time, don't be excessively long. The reason is, think about your pivot tables. You really want to create pivot tables where the values are not too long and difficult to read and not too short and difficult to interpret. So you've got to avoid acronyms and come up with a really good collection of terms that you use for naming things. All right. Now, given that in mind, I'm now going to do another little exercise manipulating my data. So I'm going to first of all go to Query and go to Edit to get back to my Power Query editor. I'm going to go to the Sales 2019 to 2021 query, and I want to rename this column Country. So I'm just going to press F2. Oops, now that thinks I want to rename the query. Escape. Click on the column heading and press F2 and just call it Country. In the Customers query, I'm going to rename Customer ID. Click the column heading, press F2, just ID. And company name, F2, is just going to be company. So I'm following best practices and using terms that everybody has agreed are friendly and make sense. And postal code is simply called postcode. So I've renamed some of the columns within two of the queries. Now I'm going to close and load, so it loads it into Excel. I'm going to right click the customers sheet, which is, if I right click here and go to customers and OK, there's my customers sheet. I'm going to right click the customers sheet and delete the customers sheet, because we deleted that from our data model, but we didn't delete it from here. So I'm going to delete that and delete. I'm going to click each sheet and double click the sheet name and rename the sheet to reflect the name of the connected query. All right, so here we have Sales 2021, that's its old name. I'm going to double click 2019 to 2021. Volunteers list is correct. Control page down just moves me to each one. 10 most expensive products, yes. Suppliers, categories, but I want those in front of 10 most expensive. Suppliers goes in front, categories goes in front. Control page down, 10 most expensive products, shippers, correct. Order details, I want next. Order details. Employees, customers, employees, customers, now. Okay, this should be renamed customers and in front of sales by region. And orders should be named orders. Already have one called that. Escape. Oops. Escape. Let's move forward. Okay, orders 2 and orders. Orders 2 we renamed orders 1997 to 2000. And sales by region is on the end. Orders there, customers there, correct. To make sure that your sheets are arranged correctly, that your sheets are reflecting the names of the queries in Power Query and nice user-friendly terms, and save what we've done so far.